I'm injured, now what? And you know, there's different type of injuries. Number one, there's you know, you can have them in a lot of different ways. But for the sake of argument, let's assume that somebody's responsible for your injuries.
Right.
And I think it's a great question. I'm injured, now what? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that do not know what to do. They get sorely confused about our automobile insurance being a no-fault type of policy and type of state. Then, you know, if they get injured at somebody's property, you know, they have med pay that's paying, but it doesn't mean that that person's actually accepting any type of responsibility, even though their insurance company has paid for some injuries, you know. And then you have issues where, you know, you may have a dog bite issue. You may have someone that's caused an accident that is non-insured at all, but maybe have tons of assets. And you're like, well, they don't have insurance, so there's nothing that can be done to them. Well, if Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or someone like that didn't have insurance, I think you've heard their name enough.
Not real worried about his
You're not real worried about it, right? So, you know, there's a lot of different things that I'm sure that questions that go through individuals' minds about, I've been injured in some form or fashion. What do I do now? So, you know, if you're involved in a car crash, just what would be the first things that you would say to do?
Well, in the immediacy of it, if assuming you're not in a situation where you need to be rushed immediately to the hospital, because the number one priority anytime you've been injured is to get medical attention and get yourself taken care of. But secondarily to that is you want to make sure that accident is reported and properly documented from inception. We have this happen all the time where folks are like, well, let's just exchange numbers and have insurance information go back and forth. That's not the proper way to handle a situation. You need to make sure and have that documented by calling law enforcement and going through the appropriate channels so that everything is on the straight and narrow from the get-go.
Now, Ted, just to be clear, for an auto accident, even though we live in a no-fault state, that does not mean that you cannot file a claim against the person who hit you. No fault only means that your PIP policy on your own policy is going to start paying first.
The two biggest phrases that I hear get misused in this context are no fault and I have full coverage.
Yes.
Neither one of those terms mean what they sound like they mean. I get it from just, if I didn't deal with this every day, you hear Florida's a no-fault state, you think that doesn't mean you have the ability to pursue a claim, and someone is told by their agent that they have full coverage, they think that means they have coverage for anything under the sun. A
lot of assumptions there.
A lot of assumptions that's just not accurate. Full coverage technically only means that you have the legal minimum requirements, which in Florida, as we currently sit as a result of the legislators we've elected over the years, all you're required to carry is $10,000 in those no-fault benefits, which are the benefits that provide you with medical coverage for the first $10,000 of any claim, whether it's your fault or not. That's all the no-fault means. And then in addition to that, you have to carry $10,000 of property damage liability coverage to protect the other individual's vehicle if you cause an accident. You are not required by Florida law to carry any amount of coverage to protect you if you hurt someone else. So that's a big issue right there, because whether or not you have insurance does not have any factor on whether or not you have liability and exposure. If you cause something and you hurt someone, you have exposure. Now, there may be issues where it renders it where it's not practical to pursue that particular individual if they don't have the assets of a Jeff Bezos, but even if you have a secondary lake home or you have other checking accounts and different things, there's a lot of protections in Florida, but there still are a lot of things out there that you're leaving exposed if you don't properly insure. So we talk about this all the time. It's important to talk with your agent about what assets you have and what your liabilities are. How many vehicles do you own? How much are you driving on the road? Are you working for someone in your car? All of these things are issues that need to be addressed, and to a point that Chris alluded to earlier, do you have a dog at the house? Make sure you've talked to your insurance agent about that and what coverages you need for that.
Because that's property damage. Now, Ted, you know, on the side here, we actually run another division of the company that basically will allow you to call us and we'll tell you about, you know, your policy. We'll sit down with you. And I say it's a division. It's not really a division. It's just we probably could start a business out of explaining insurance. But if you've got a question about your policy, call us. No cost to you. if you want to come in and sit down with us and say, man, I haven't even been injured in an accident, but please, by all means, tell me what I need to buy.
And what does this mean?
What does this mean? We would love to talk to you. We love talking insurance. We love helping people, number one. And just give us a call. We'll get you in front of an attorney that can give you a legal opinion about what type of property, what type of insurance you should have in your setting, as long as you're, full disclosure about what's going on.
And we've had people take us up on that, Chris,
Right.
and I've handled several of those calls myself. And I mean, I love to hear from our loyal, long-time LawCall viewers, and they say, hey, I've seen you, you've offered that, and dadgummit, I got you on the phone.
Are you serious? Absolutely. Or you can email us. So Ted, that's auto side. But you then kind of alluded to something with, if you have an animal, and that's property side, because, there's a lot of animals out there that actually are not insurable. And so, some of your insurance, some of your homeowners policies will actually exclude those type of animals from any type of coverage. And so if you, worst case scenario, have a lot of assets and your dog attacks someone and bites them, you don't get the first bite for free. You're immediately strictly liable. And if your insurance company does not step up and defend you and pay that claim because of an exclusion in that policy, you are personally on the hook for writing a check out to compensate the person that you caused harm to.
Right. We've seen that end very badly.
We've
for
made
some
that happen.
individuals, unfortunately, that did not have insurance or did not properly put their insurance company on notice,
Right.
and they allowed us to continue along with the case and ignore it, and they got rather large judgments against them that we collected. Now, we can't guarantee that in every case, and that's why we have to look at it. One of the things that we do anytime we're pursuing a case where there is not going to be insurance coverage is we have to make a professional opinion on is this something we feel like we can help the individual with, because it doesn't do us any good to get someone a judgment that we can't collect on. So we want to try to find those situations where
I'm not trying to scare someone, but there are certain animals that you may love, and that might be the family. I mean, it might be part of the family. We have a French bulldog who's part of our family. I mean, anywhere my wife goes, he goes with her. But you have to understand some of the risk of ownership.
Right.
And, in today's age and under Florida law, you don't get the first bite for free. And what that means is you can't say, oh, I didn't know that dog would bite someone, or that's not his nature or her nature. When that animal attacks someone, and unfortunately, they're very painful and nasty injuries that come about from any type of biting. So just keep in mind that, contact your insurance company, your homeowner's policy, to make sure that you're not subjecting and exposing yourself to anything that's basically non-insur or uninsurable.
We need to know what you're dealing with.
So, Ted, that's a dog bite case. We briefly talked about it earlier, when you are at someone's house and you get injured. That person, even though they own the property, is not technically 100% automatically liable. You still have to prove negligence, that they knew about a condition and failed to remedy that condition, or that existed on the property that caused your injuries. Now, there is some confusion, and we've heard it in the past. Well, their insurance company's paying my medical bills, but they're not accepting liability. How does that work?
Well, and we referenced this briefly earlier, there are different types of coverages on different types of policies. One provision under standard homeowners policies is what's called a medical payments coverage, which is kind of a automatic, it's similar to the PIP, no fault, that it pays in accordance with like health insurance if you fall on somebody's property. The problem with those are typically very low level policies. You're looking at maybe $1,000, $2,500, $5,000, in extreme cases maybe 10, but that's unusual. And so those will pay irrespective of fault. If you're going to hold a homeowner liable, you are going to have to show that they were negligent, which means that they failed to use reasonable care under the circumstances. And so that's something that typically is going to require, almost always is going to require the assistance of a lawyer to help you navigate those types of claims, because those, especially after our legislature amended the statutes, that are much more difficult to pursue. And so you need to get some advice. You need to make sure you document the thing. You need to make sure everyone's on notice. And a lot of times those can be very, very bad claims. Right. A typical one we see, or you're looking at orthopedic, femur fractures, knee injuries, those kind of things, hips. So that a lot of times when you're talking about a fall, very significant injuries, very significant recovery. So it's important you know what your options are.
Now, Ted, that's basically on the residential side, but there's a commercial aspect of that as well. And I think that when you're, and just hate to say this, but if you're in a grocery store, that's typically where you can see some slip and falls
Yes.
because of, produce falling down or a hazard being created for somebody tripping and falling, because your eyes are naturally elevated to the shelves, not to the floor where you're walking. By all means, if you get involved in an incident or an accident there, you need to make sure that you contact somebody immediately from the store, a manager. Bring a department manager over right now. Or find
Document
some
it.
employee that can document it, because even though those buildings may or may not have a lot of cameras to them, you still need to document what happened, how it happened, who was involved, what happened, because a lot of times, it's hard to explain. I mean, take for instance, you and I were in very good health, and heck, I mean, we could slip and fall in some of these instances because your eyes are not looking down at the floor,
Right.
You're looking at the shelves. And we've had cases in the past to where we've seen buggies being pushed through a mess that left a trail that the person didn't even see, that we knew that we could have established that had been there for a substantial amount of time. And they knew or should have known, the owner of the store knew or should have known that that should have been cleaned up, and it created a dangerous condition or dangerous hazard for that individual. But just like in an auto case, in any type of case, if you can, the best you can, make sure that you document, and you get an incident report filled out, and that's the starting point. And then you kind of go from there, and we would hope that you hire an attorney, but you can try to do it yourself, but that always
Right.
doesn't work out.